Spectral Lakes, Episode 5, Dance of the Swan. With final semester exams looming, Chris and Charlotte hadn't had much time for hiking or lazing by the lake. Charlotte had been teaching ballet to older kids, and her mentor signed her up for a big competition in Seattle, a show that could make or break her dance career. All the big agencies would be represented, critics watching with judging eyes. And so, she practiced her heart out every single day, normally coming home at night with sore feet and a hopeful heart. Meanwhile, Chris was due to begin his 3-month police training program. He was wickedly excited for it and spent most days either studying, working out, or at the range. Sometimes he took calorie-burning runs around Lake Lullaby, the smallest of the town's 3 surrounding lakes. During those rare, free evenings, he'd carve mini statuettes and decorations for his and Charlotte's new home, a small rental cabin in the woods on the outskirts of town near Foxglove. Charlotte had taken over as interior decorator, working her magic with thrift store-bought furniture and refurbished drapery. They'd made sure, whenever possible, to set aside money for Paris. It was going to take time to earn the funds, but thanks to their jobs and a couple of scholarships, the dream didn't seem as far off as they'd thought. Chris had carved a little wooden Eiffel Tower for the mantelpiece to remind them of their goal. Chris still played games online with his Valkyrie friends and made music, but those things were becoming harder and harder to find time for with so much of life getting in the way. But despite this, Chris felt happy. He didn't quite know what life had in store for him, but he was eager to find out. And whenever he felt doubt, he prayed, asking for direction. Finally, Charlotte's big day arrived. She rose in the wee hours of the morning and began readying herself, stretching, practicing, getting everything in order. By the time Chris had dragged himself out of bed, she was fully decked out in her rented Swan princess costume, a set of white wings wrapped around her waist and her collar swathed in feathers. She carefully placed her satin ballet shoes in her blue bag and turned to face Chris, a nervous but proud smile on her face. "This is the start of it, Chris," she said breathlessly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Chris pulled her in for a kiss. The theater was full of people. Audience members quietly chatted among themselves. The panel of judges organized their rating forms, and agents typed notes into their tablets. Chris's stomach knotted. I do not envy how she must be feeling right now. The lights dimmed, and, all at once, the orchestra burst into life. For the next half an hour, dancers, performing one by one, showed off their talents. The audience applauded after each performance, and Chris nervously glanced at the judges to gauge their reactions. And then, the curtains parted. A lone figure stood, her pale arms raised to the sky. The orchestra swelled, the opening strain of Swan's theme from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake filling the auditorium. Charlotte, as Odette, lunged, her body languid, controlled, her movements relaxed and loose, and the magic took hold, her body twisting, hardening, her arms fluttering. Her movement slowed as she was overtaken by grief, for the sorcery had taken her, cursing her to remain a swan by day and a human only by night on the waters of the enchanted lake. Chris had seen Swan Lake before, and, as such, recalled the story as Charlotte danced through a condensed version of the tale. A prince begged by his mother to soon marry hunts in the forest, whereupon he comes across Odette as a swan and sees her transform into a human. They fall in love, but all is cut short when dawn arrives and Odette must once again become a swan. Later, at a costumed royal ball, the evil wizard Rothbart, who cursed Odette in the first place, attends, his daughter disguised as Odette. The prince dances with her, and, at the end of the night, declares his intention to marry her. The true Odette watches the scene from the window, and is so distraught she flees to the lake. Once the deception is revealed, the heartbroken prince rushes into the woods to find Odette. Though she forgives him, her heart is forever shattered, and she cannot bear to live any longer as a swan. The ballet ends with both Odette and the prince sinking into the lake, their arms intertwined as their souls ascend to heaven. Though Charlotte was alone on stage, she masterfully told the sad tale through her movements. Every turn was purposeful, every step perfectly aligned. She bounded and twirled across the stage, leaving Chris breathless. Suddenly, she stopped. Her eyes caught on something in the audience. There was a moment of strange stillness before her body jerked, falling again into step. Confused, Chris turned, scanning the crowd. Whatever she'd seen, it had affected her. Even now, her face was red, her brows furrowed, her movements hard and sharp. Betrayed by the prince, Charlotte's Odette jabbed and kicked, ran across the stage, and collapsed to the ground, succumbing to silent sobs. An audience member could have interpreted this as all part of the show. Charlotte just another ballerina who slathered her performance in dramatic, rich emotion. But Chris knew better. Something was very wrong. Chris watched, frowning, as Charlotte spun low, unable to bear her curse any longer, and drowned in the lake. Without a prince, Charlotte's rendition of the death seemed quieter, lonelier than normal. The stage swam with blue light, Odette sinking ever deeper before her last breath left her body. The music faded. There was a silence. As one, the audience erupted into applause. After a moment, Chris joined in, his mind racing. Charlotte's face was hard, any individual emotion hard to make out. It took all of Chris's willpower to stay in his seat as the rest of the dancers performed. Finally, as the last dancer bowed and left the stage, the judges rose and disappeared to deliberate. Pushing through the shifting audience as they filed into the lobby, Chris bolted backstage. He found Charlotte sat in front of a mirror framed by light bulbs, her hair unpinned, a long strand covering one eye. She combed through it over and over, her gaze impossibly distant. "Charlotte? Hey, are you all right? What's wrong?" Chris touched her shoulder, jerking back when she jumped, whipping around to face him. Her gaze was sharp, but softened immediately. "Oh, Chris!" She cupped his hand in hers. Her skin was clammy. "I'm sorry. You surprised me." Chris's brows knitted. "Did something happen during the show? You looked like you'd seen the lady or something. I was really concerned." He brushed the strand of hair away from her eyes, tucking it behind an ear. Charlotte dipped her head, the hair falling back over her face. "No, nothing like that." She grasped her bottle of water and took a few gulps. "I just twisted my leg the wrong way and was angry I messed up." "Oh," Chris responded. He felt a slow twist in his stomach. She sounded a bit off. "Is she lying to me?" "Sorry, Chris. I need to get ready for the judge's announcement. I'll see you afterward, okay?" She shot him a small smile before turning back to the mirror. "All right. See you." Chris backed away, his chest tight. Back in his seat, Chris watched the crowd as they filed back into the theater, searching for anyone he recognized. Person after person pushed past the doors and down the aisles, but Chris knew none of them. He let out a sigh and nervously adjusted his jacket. The judges paraded onto the stage, followed by the young dancers that had performed that night. Their costumes glittered beneath the stage lights in patterns of pastel hues. Charlotte seemed to be completely composed. She stared into space, focusing on anything but the audience. Chris dug his nails into his hands as the judges announced award winners in particular categories. Minutes ticked by, elderly voices announcing name after name, until, finally, a crow-looking woman dressed in black glanced down at a note card in her satin-gloved hands. "And for Best Storytelling, the award goes to Charlotte Ramsey." The crowd applauded. Chris stood up and clapped, his beaming grin finally bringing Charlotte's attention to the crowd. Her posture broke for a moment, her eyes welling up as a smile broke through. The crow woman placed a simple medal around her neck and handed her a check.
This is it, Chris thought, his chest swelling. This is the start of it all.
To be continued.